All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Another late night show here, but apparently some people are better at telling the future than I am. Several people said, hey, I want to watch the show tonight. I want to watch it live because I never remember to see them afterwards, but I don't want to miss any of that super exciting Jets-Browns football game, which, you know, I didn't think was going to be a classic, but proved me wrong. We got Tyrod Taylor getting knocked out. Not that surprising when you play a style of football that he plays, and Baker Mayfield coming in and electrifying. So, but we can't skip any days, or, well, can't skip more than one day in a row because we didn't do a show yesterday. We did the Northwest Division the day before yesterday. Today, we are on to the somewhat curiously named Southwest Division, if I'm being honest. The Southwest Division is 3 teams in Texas, which certainly is south, but not really that far west, and then 2 teams that are legitimately easily within the eastern half of the country, that being Memphis and New Orleans. Nonetheless, those 5 teams make up the Southwest Division, that being, of course, the Mavericks, the Spurs, and the Rockets in Texas, the Grizzlies, and the Pellies. So, again, just in case you didn't see the previous show, giving you the 20-second spiel of what we're doing here. It's amazing how different NBA DFS is during the preseason relative to during the regular season. During the regular season, especially after you get more than a couple weeks in, minutes being such a dependable stat, the level of the public to play a good lineup is very, very high. Relative to just sort of as a percentage of how good the lineups are that the average Joe is playing, your NBA DFS lineups are better than your NFL lineups, are better than your MLB lineups, because NBA is simply easier. So during the regular season, there's a lot of zigging when they zag. There is a lot of dealing with ownership, and there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but just sort of building the best lineup is difficult. Playing cash is difficult because it's hard to get over that rake when it's so easy for the public to develop usually a fairly solid lineup if they're paying any attention whatsoever. The preseason actually ends up being the converse, and it tends to be really, really good money, and has been the last couple of years. Again, talk to anyone who's been around for a couple of years with me. But even more so, it's pretty easy because you can just do what you can't do during the regular season, which is just play guys who you expect to get the most minutes, because unlike the regular season where 90% of the field is basically on that and knows how to correctly, optimize those plays, during the preseason it's 30% or some incredibly small number. And so, of course, you can still mess around, and there's other things we're looking at. We talk about matchups, but if you just play the preseason and know who's going to play, enough people don't that, yeah, that's often enough to win. So as much as I'd like to take credit for my ingenuity and analyzing all the games down to the nth degree, so I had the hottest plays. Sure, it's some of that, but it's also the fact that in basketball, if they're playing, the 8 guys on their team play an average of 20 minutes, and the 8 guys on your team play an average of 27 minutes, you're going to win. And that ends up being the case more than you would expect in this particular situation. I don't know what expect is as a word, but probably expect is what I was going for. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get into this. Let's start by talking about everybody's favorite team, the San Antonio Spurs. Last year's record, they were 47-35. They finished the 7th seed, which normally wouldn't be that bad, but here it gave you the Golden State Warriors. They did manage to pull a game from this historically great Golden State legacy that they are running out there right now, but they still lost to the Warriors in 5. If you look at Vegas now, they are projected in most shops to be around 44-38, which would end their NBA record. I should have looked this up. I believe 21 consecutive playoff seasons. I think this is Pop's 23rd. And of his 22 years with the team, the first one he didn't make it, and then he's consecutively made it for 21 years, which is longer than a number of franchises had even been in existence, which is longer than the careers of anyone who's played in the league. Like, there's no one playing basketball now in the NBA who was playing basketball the last time Pop didn't make the playoffs. Dirk's getting close, Vince is getting close, but a truly remarkable streak, due in fortune to some lucky hits when you pick up Kawhi on the back of, you know, getting yourself a decade each out of David Robinson and almost 2 decades out of Tim Duncan. But a lot of credit obviously given to the coach. The next guy we're going to talk about here, again, Greg Popovich. I think this is year number 23 for him. I think I got that right. But longest tenured coach in the league by quite a bit. And just about one of my favorite dudes ever, never afraid to speak his mind, funny. His thing with Craig Sager for all those years. Gotta love Pop. Pop has been in the league long enough that we're reviewing the Southwest Division here. When Pop got this job, there was no Southwest Division. It was the Midwest Division, I believe, that the Spurs were in at that time. So a man with some significant tenure. New additions to this team, and when I say new addition, I don't mean anything like Bell Biv DeVoe or Bobby Brown. I mean new additions with an A, new guys coming into the team. Marco Bellinelli returning to the team. Some number of years ago, he actually led the Spurs in minutes, even when he didn't start one year. That's a good piece of trivia after they had a very successful year. Nobody got that question, right? You're like, who played the most minutes for the Spurs last year? And the answer was Marco Bellinelli at like 26.2. Which, again, is one of the reasons why Pop being a great coach, not always our favorite coach when we are talking about daily fantasy sports. But Bellinelli returns to the team. Dante Cunningham is in the team and from Brooklyn and New Orleans and several other places. DeMar DeRozan, of course, and Jakob Poeltl come over in the Kawhi Leonard trade. Trying to think who else is there. Lonnie Walker out of the draft, but otherwise basically the same hands on deck there. Guys out. Kyle Anderson, which is a significant loss, signs a deal with Memphis. Manu Ginobili, of course, retired. Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green have found their way north of the border. Joffrey Laverne is no longer with the team, and Tony Parker has gone to back up Kemba Walker in Charlotte. So our expected starters for this team, and I'm pretty sure this will be the thing on opening day, but probably not as the season goes on. You'll get DeJounte Murray starting at the point, DeMar DeRozan at the 2, Rudy Gay at the 3, LaMarcus Aldridge at the 4, and Pau Gasol I expect to start opening day at the 5. If one of them was going to be in doubt, Pau would be the one. I'd be very surprised if Pau didn't start on opening day, but everyone else is pretty much a lock. Pau Gasol, you could see some sort of small ball lineup with LaMarcus Aldridge sliding to the 5, or you could see Jakob Poeltl overtake him that quickly in just a half dozen preseason games. But, yeah, Chimezie Metu is injured. I can't remember what's wrong with him, but he is under contract with the team, but I don't think he was going to get time anyway. And he's hurt somewhat significantly, but I can't remember actually his issue. But, yeah, USC. So, he's in the draft, but I think he is hurt. But thank you for whomever is watching the show from our channel of keeping me on point there. So, notable injuries for the team. Metu, as just mentioned there, I can't remember exactly how he's jacked up. Both Derek White and Lonnie Walker were dealing with fairly minor lower body injuries. One had a calf strain, one had, I think, a turned ankle towards the end of Summer League, where they both did some real damage. They are both 100% healthy now, and will be competing for those backup guard minutes there. So, unsurprisingly, this is a team that, past a couple guys, does really spread around the minutes. They are a team that frequently, runs a lot of guys. Again, I mentioned Bellinelli leading this team in minutes 3 years ago with about 26. The last couple of years, it's been LaMarcus Aldridge by a pretty reasonable amount, both in the preseason and the regular season. If you look at the preseason last year, LaMarcus Aldridge played 26.2 minutes a game. And that was the most by 3.5 minutes. The next is DeJounte Murray at 22.6. Kyle Anderson played 22.2. So did Pau Gasol, played 22.2. Rudy Gay played 21.1. They played 15 total players. 13 of them logged between 13.5 and 22.5 minutes. So again, outside of Aldridge, who has some appeal and who I do expect to again see a ton of minutes, and maybe DeRozan, who we'll talk about a little more in a minute, the starters don't have a ton of appeal for me. Though you can make an argument for DeJounte Murray, too, who pops a smart guy out of this. DeJounte Murray is going to get a ton of minutes this year relative to what guys on this team normally get. He probably does get like over 30 minutes this year, which is really significant. He's a guy we'll want to target both in the preseason and the regular season as fantasy starts, because they're just guys who, relative to last year, are going to play more, and be more involved, and he is one of those guys who is still growing as a player and was said by the coach and by Tony Parker before he left town. So we're definitely interested in DeJounte Murray as a player. And you can make an argument for actually 4 of the starters in the preseason. So I'll sort of remand my comments there. I don't think they run Rudy Gay out there that much, and there's a couple extra guys they'd run at the wing. So if Rudy Gay exceeded the 21 minutes he got last year, I'd be a little bit surprised. I imagine he's still in that range. But DeMar DeRozan is obviously new in town. They want to figure out exactly what to do with him and who he's going to fit in with. That's a reason to maybe throw some extra minutes at the guy. DeJounte Murray, I already mentioned. And I guess Aldridge is the third one that I think is actually most interesting. I would say those 3 would be only starters we're going to look at. But they're a team that would be a little more in trying to pick up some of the bench guys and value guys who we think get 18, 20, 21 minutes than any of the other starters. If you look at the year before that, that was even more derf. If you look at 2016-2017 preseason, LaMarcus Aldridge had the most preseason minutes with 23.5. Kawhi, 22.2. Pau Gasol, 21.4. Tony Parker, 20. 19 guys played at least 4 games, and a dozen of them played between 17.5 and 13.5 minutes a game. That's a whole lot of mess. So again, between now over the next week and every day as we go through these slates and really try to maximize this value period of the year for ourselves, we're going to pay a lot of attention. I think DeRozan is going to be a great play during the preseason, reminiscent of Paul George last preseason. New team needs to get acclimated. I'm fractured left wrist for Metu. There you go. Thank you for I keep track of most of it in my head. I didn't recall exactly what his issue was. I'm going to be inclined to disagree with you. The Spurs, not unlike the Jazz, are a more systemic offense that aren't as into breaking down people one-on-one, which is a lot of what DeMar DeRozan does extremely well. And we've seen more often than not, when free agents come to the Spurs, they struggle for a while. When Pau Gasol came to the Spurs, he struggled for a while. Didn't get a ton of minutes and wasn't doing a lot with him. Even his per 36 was way down. When LaMarcus Aldridge came there, he didn't really get going for almost 2 years. And he was just absent for the first couple months, where he was running, you could look it up, but if you told me for the first couple months he was averaging 25 minutes, 12 points, and 6 rebounds, that sounds about right to me. Like, it really took him a while to get going. Now, there are other factors there. You were dealing with Kawhi being amazing during a lot of that time, and a more present Ginobili, and Tony Parker being better, and so there is a weaker supporting cast here. So I do want to temper my limitation with that caveat, but I would be surprised if DeRozan in games against teams not from Canada was terribly effective. There's a chance, but I'm guessing he's going to end up in average minutes relative to the league, and much less than some other guys we can target if we're paying close attention. And again, pricing for 2018-19 for most guys is going to be somewhat based on their production from last year, and I think he will be a less productive basketball player this year than he was last year. I'm generally going to think he's going to be stat down. How you doing, Robert? I don't know if Kawhi Eisenberg is in here. If he's not watching this, he's going to watch the replay. So he did specifically import me to discuss DeRozan's tweet from this afternoon, which was revenge is a dish which is best served cold. I have a few comments on this. First of all, both Kill Bill Volume 1 and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, excellent films, which I recommend you see if you haven't. Second, while that is a badass line, I don't think it doesn't apply that well here. Like, revenge is a dish that is best served cold is like, you screwed me, I sat and plotted my revenge for 15 years until you got old and fat and happy, and then I broke into your bedroom late at night one night and slit your throat. Like, it's supposed to mean I waited a while. You got traded like 5 weeks ago or whatever it is. That's a little like your revenge is still, has some heat coming off it sitting outside the microwave. Your revenge at this point would be lukewarm, DeMar. So I like you, using some language to convey your invective and your vehemence and your emotions, but I'm not sure you did so terribly accurately. No, we're halfway through the Spurs, Andy. But again, you can restart if you missed the first 3 minutes there. But again, the Spurs not quite to the level of the Mavs and some of the other teams we're going to talk about, but not a team we're overwhelmingly going to look over. But again, I think Aldridge, Murray, and DeRozan, guys that will certainly have some interest in the preseason, and I'll be certainly keeping my ear to the ground over the next week to see exactly what's going on there. So again, so talking about some of the other guys here, Rudy Gay is in a really good spot this year. And it's not impossible that maybe he does get up to 24 minutes in the preseason because they're really thin at the 3. They don't have a clear backup for him. Dante Cunningham, especially as he gets a little bit older, is really more of a 4. They don't want to throw him out there. They can run small, where they're running some combination of Murray, DeRozan, Patty Mills, and Bellinelli. I mean, that running small lets them give a little more time to Patty Mills. I think they still want to get him out there for 20, 22 minutes a game. And they also want to play DeJounte Murray up into the 30s. If you're going to try to do both those things, obviously he's going to have to play somewhere other than the 1. But it's going to be interesting to see how they back up that spot. But I do think Rudy Gay's minutes come up this year, and he's a little bit more productive. I still like Aldridge to be more of the guy on this team for a while than DeRozan. Is it impossible that DeRozan immediately acclimates and stays in all-star form and stays at the level he was last year? Sure, but I would right now think the pace is going to be down, and my guess is DeRozan's year, and this I really should get like a chalkboard behind me and start writing down bets I make with myself. But I'll say that all DeRozan stats go down this year. That's just my best guess offhand. Not to be forgotten, both the other guys in this trade, Danny Green being out of town is very relevant, and him being up in Toronto now, because he's going to obviously pick up some time there. But also the other guy coming from that trade in Jakob Poeltl, Pau Gasol is 38, 39. He's in his late 30s at this point. His minutes are going to continue to come down. So that doesn't necessarily mean that Poeltl's getting a ton of time. Pau Gasol averaged, I don't actually know this offhand, but somewhere in the low 20s in minutes last year. I'll guess somewhere around 24 minutes a game. And whatever it was, he's going to shed a couple more of those even this year, and that's assuming he stays healthy. Jakob Poeltl is a fairly compelling DFS play. I've seen some workout video of him over the summer, really working on his inside game more than anything else. Really, really good offensive rebounder. And not shocking to see him, if he started games this year, I wouldn't be incredibly surprised in certain matchups. There's going to be some matchups where you're going to have a lot of trouble if you're Pau Gasol and you can't go all the way small for whatever reason due to another team being big. So, for example, against the Timberwolves in certain situations, I can see spots where you actually could get a start out of Jakob Poeltl. Plus, they're going to rest Pau Gasol some 10 games. So that's actually a very interesting guy to keep an eye on. Wouldn't surprise me if he got 20 minutes a game in the preseason. He could be a value guy. I'd be looking at the first day depending on who exactly their matchup is. Davis Bertans will still be around. I don't think you get a big step forward from him. Mills we mentioned, not a ton to see there. Bellinelli again, I think loses some of the upside that he had in Philadelphia just because of the nature of those two offenses. Not a lot to see with Cunningham. So I guess that's where we'll stop with the Spurs for now. But interested to see exactly what they roll out there. Not if I listed the order in which I'm targeting teams, like number 1 might be Houston. There's a couple other teams that I expect to run a lot of minutes on a lot of guys in the preseason. The Spurs would be like 24 or 25. Not out of play, but pretty well down there. So let's go ahead and move on to... It's Popovich. DeRozan will settle into the 7,000 to 7,600 range on DK. Worst team in the league for DFS value. Not the worst team in the league because they're a very efficient offense, but towards the bottom. I would certainly give you that. All right, second team we're talking about here, the Grizzlies of Memphis. Again, this is the Southwest Division. Sorry to be a stickler, but yeah, it's due south of me, and I'm in Ohio. Anyway, last year's record, I believe, 22-60 for this team. Did they make the playoffs? No, they had... I don't know if they were the worst team in the NBA. I think the Suns may have finished a game worse. They were the worst or the second worst team in the NBA by terms of record. Obviously, they hit the tank hard. Can we skip Memphis? Memphis, there's a couple very skippable teams here. Memphis, and then we have the Mavericks on our schedule here. And the Mavericks play exactly one game on this side of the planet. So... it's going to be an exciting game. I'm going to want to see that game. I'm going to watch the Chinese games too. I think they tip at 7:30 and 8 a.m. my time, if I recall correctly. Because The Warriors and the Timberwolves last year played the 2 games in China, and this year those 2 games will be played by the Mavs and the 76ers, which sucks because you're taking away my Luka Doncic and my Ben Simmons and my Joel Embiid, and I wanted those guys, but we're gonna, yes, like someone already said, fuck the Mavs. I had a thing here where I was gonna do a call response thing in my notes to get someone to say that, and Robert Ingram way out in front with fuck the Mavs. Yeah, we said that many times last year. Most frequently, fuck the Mavs was a frequent recurring theme in the. We'll get there. We got to fuck the Grizzlies first. So, bear fucker. That's funny. Okay, so projected Vegas record 33-53. What's really interesting, by the way, if I worked in Vegas right now, projecting records is interesting because of how widespread tanking has become. Not a lot of teams get 33 wins. You tend to get 40 or 24 because you realize at some point during the season where you're, 24-46, and you're like, I'm not going anywhere. Time to lose these last dozen games. So it's really, was I right on Memphis? All right, they were the second worst team. So projected the Vegas average appears to be about 33-53, which again is hard to do. You think they'd either be more competitive and turn it on a little or run the tank out hard again. Be interesting to see, but that would be an 11-game improvement, which on some level is pretty impressive, but you'd be about 15 games out of the playoffs, so that's not great. As a nice segue, talking about guys coming into this team, we have Kyle Anderson from the aforementioned Spurs. They drafted Javon Carter of, I think, Stanford, Summer League standout. Made a few of us some Summer League money. That worked extremely well. Omri Caspi is in town, of course. They drafted a guy I'm pretty excited to see play in Jaren Jackson Jr. They signed Shelvin Mack, and they signed Garrett Temple. It was interesting. He's a very Sacramento guy. I like to have Garrett Temple there. They lost Mario Chalmers. Deonta Davis went to Sacramento. Ben McLemore went back to Sacramento. You know what's worse than having to play for the Kings? Playing for the Kings for a couple of years, getting traded away, and then getting traded back. Like, seriously? Like, you play for the Kings for a few years. Sorry about that. Then you get traded to Memphis right as they go from being sort of a gritty, cool bottom end of the playoffs, Conley and Gasol, tough grown team to tanky, shitty team, and then you get traded back to the Kings. Like, that's is Javon Carter from West Virginia? I'm going to Google live on air. This is quality analysis and time here. Again, I'm not until guys played for West Virginia University right there. Who am I getting him confused with? I thought he was 4 years at Stanford. Let me look it up. He did play 4 years. He's 23 years old. Okay, so I had that part of the puzzle correct, but I got my colleges confused. So again, thank you for correcting me. See? You were born in Sacramento and moved 22 years ago. No way you're coming back. It's a great place to live. It's a somewhat dysfunctional franchise. So anyhow, Javon Carter, thank you guys for keeping me honest. Lost those guys you mentioned. Of course, lost Tyreek Evans, who was transcendent for them last year, who went to the Pacers. Mike Henry is gone. Jarrell Martin is gone. Much like the Nuggets, they've decided to stop collecting power forwards. There were some fun days last year where it was like, all right, each of these teams has 6 power forwards. I wonder who's going to play today. They've each shed a few of them in the offseason, so that's fun. And Kobe Simmons was a free agent. He signed with Cleveland. He's going to be probably their third-string point guard. Their coach is Bernie Bickerstaff. JB Bickerstaff. Bernie Bickerstaff is his dad, who coached the Nuggets and the Sonics, and I think was the first coach for the Bobcats when they got expanded out in 03, 04, or 04, 05, or whenever that was. I would guess that JB Bickerstaff has the record for the most games head coached in the NBA history without ever coaching the first game of the season. He has coached, I think it's 134 games, which is 28 games shy of 2 full seasons. But he was never the coach on an opening day of a season until now. So I imagine that's a record. I don't know if you can stat muse that. I seriously doubt it can handle that question, but I don't even know how I'd look that up. But he came in for Kevin McHale as their interim guy when he got fired for no good reason with a halfway decent record from the Rockets pretty early into that year. And then came in when they let David Fisdale go last year. So he's coached 2 November, I think, both of them firings, which are pretty rare in the NBA, and finished out the year for both of those. This time I'll finally get to start fresh. This derfs my analysis a little bit there. looking at preseason trends. I will talk briefly about what Memphis did last year. I've decided that looking back at what his dad did in the preseason 15 years ago would be a bit too derivative even for me. Although, in fairness, he was an assistant coach on all those teams. His dad was the head coach of I think his dad's last head coaching job was the 4 years with Charlotte. And I think JB was an assistant coach on all 4 of those. New Orleans should win this division. No, the Rockets are going to win this division. Don't get me wrong, the Rockets are going to be a lot worse than last year, and they'll still win this division by, I'd put the over-under at about 8 games. And I really like the Pelicans. But, so anyhow, yeah, so, okay, so expected starters for this team. All right, barring injuries happening in the next week, Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson, and Marc Gasol will start for this team at the nominal 1, 3, and 5. The 4 is either going to be veteran, solid, unexciting JaMychal Green or rookie, incredibly exciting Jaren Jackson Jr. There's a big ceiling and a big floor there. He's got, I mean, just short of like Anthony Davis ceiling. I don't think he'll ever be that kind of offensive player, but you know, during the preseason, he had an 8 3-pointer and an 8 block game. That's pretty goddamn exciting. Can we please get an injury-free season from Conley? So underrated. Mike Conley, who for a month was the highest-paid player in the National Basketball Association. Do I think the Rockets will be worse? I think the Rockets will not win 65 games. Yes, I'll take the under. And Vegas has them 9 games worse or something like that. So yes, I do think the Rockets will be worse. At the beginning of the year last year, people were talking about what they expected. And again, this was, you know, before Kyrie injuries and before Gordon Hayward injuries. But a lot of people were like, okay, the Warriors are going to be the best team. That was pretty universal. And then there was a real conversation as to whether or not the second best team was going to be the Thunder or the Celtics or the Cavs or the Rockets were the next 4 that people were really talking about. And from the beginning, it's going to be the Rockets. This team is going to be incredible. I love the way this team is put together. We'll get to the Rockets in a minute, but they are going to get worse. Can we please get an injury-free preseason from Conley? He is so underrated. Well, when he is on the court, he's great. I think he played 12 games last year off the top of my head and hasn't had like a good number of games in, I want to say, 3 years. And so, yeah, that's obviously the rub there. We're talking about DFS, so no, another thing we'll be listening for is how hard they're going to lean on him in the preseason. But, yeah, solid guy, has like 0 or 1 career technicals in the NBA. You know, classic guy, and really solid both ends of the court. Like, I really like Mike Conley as a player, but obviously the repeated injuries and especially feet and everything, we have some nervousness for exactly how that's going to work out. So, anyhow, they're going to start Mike Conley at the 1, Kyle Anderson at the 3, and Marc Gasol at the 5. The 4 is either going to be Jaren Jackson or JaMychal Green, and the 2 is, oh, I don't know. The other guy who is going to start, I mean, I think there is a non-zero chance of 5 dudes being the last guy who start. They like the idea and have mentioned a couple times running Harrison out there next to Conley and did it for several of the games they played together last year. And I've still heard comments on it. I don't think it's likely, but you could get Andrew Harrison out there, which sort of makes Conley a 2, although it's really a double point guard lineup. Garrett Temple is in town, who's a defensive presence, and this would be, you know, a fairly fearsome defensive team. A 1 through 5 starting lineup of Conley, Kyle Anderson, Marc Gasol, Garrett Temple, and Jaren Jackson is nasty. Like, that's not Jazz nasty, but I mean, and this Jazz team is going to be one of the best defensive teams ever. Again, I really can't wait to see that. Someone's saying I think it's Dylan Brooks. Someone's saying I think it's Wayne Selden. I think those guys both have a real shot. You also have a shot of Marshawn Brooks, who I think is less likely than either of those 2 guys. If I was to put odds on it right now, I think I would list them: Dylan Brooks, Wayne Selden, Garrett Temple, Marshawn Brooks, Andrew Harrison as the 5th guy who's going to start for this team. But there's the 3 we know, then either Jaren Jackson or JaMychal Green. I think I'm 60-40 JaMychal Green, and they ease Jaren Jackson in a little bit. But I don't know. Again, we'll be looking out for that. But yeah, that 5th guy, I don't know. So, yeah, I don't know how much there's to discuss about those guys. Yeah, so injuries. It's just Javon Carter with, I believe, a thumb ligament. Did basically the same thing I did. Again, I have one thumb, but he's actually going to be smart, unlike me, and go to the doctor. I think he actually already had surgery on it, but he's going to be a month into the season until we see him, and then he's going to, get on the man pile of people trying to play guard for this team. He'll probably be the third string guard, point guard behind Conley and Harrison. So he will get time for much of this year. And again, he, a la Grayson Allen and a couple other guys, played 4 years of college, so he's not that inexperienced. So, yeah, if we had a lot of appeal for Memphis, which we already really didn't, if you look at last preseason, the good news is, Marc Gasol led the team in minutes per game. The bad news is he played 22.9 minutes per game, and he only played 3 out of 5. But that was still good enough to lead the team in minutes in the preseason last year. Second most was James Ennis, now gone. Well, we'll get back to him in a little bit as he's on the aforementioned Rockets. I shit you not, James Ennis was number 2 at 20.3 minutes per game. Whoa. So, yeah, it was just about as Mavs clusterfucky as it can get down there. Again, maybe, Bickerstaff is demonstrably we're going to tighten that up a little bit. I really want to, compete this year, and so we're going to take our starting 5 guys and make sure they get significant minutes in the preseason. That's the kind of thing you listen for. And we'll certainly be listening for it, and no reason to think he'd specifically follow Fizdale's example from last year, but especially at certain positions where there's a lot of depth here, we're going to be cautious for the first few days on my recommendations. If you look at the year before that, Troy Williams led the preseason with 25.4 minutes per game, and then straight down the hill. Still not a lot for the starters. And again, we've actually had some coach comments over the last month or so. He said that he's going to be more conservative with Marc Gasol's minutes allotment. I think Gasol played 33 minutes a game last year. Maybe that's coming on down to 30 now. Maybe get some small ball lineups with Jared Jackson at the 5. He's an incredibly good defender. And he's going to have some sick DFS days. I think the first game of Summer League, the first game of Vegas Summer League, more accurately for him, Jaren Jackson had like 8 blocks and 8 threes or whatever it was, and had like a 57 point. It may have been the largest single line of the Summer League. And he's going to have real potential to do that because he is a preternatural defender. He's not quite Anthony Davis, but he's just a tier down from that. Plot twist, they run JaMychal at the 3 and start Conley, Anderson, Green, Jackson, Jr., Gasol. I don't think that's likely. Is Chandler Parsons ever going to come close to returning value on that contract, or was that highway robbery? I think Chandler Parsons only plays as a third string 4 this year. They don't want to take minutes away from Jaren Jackson Jr. Maybe they trade JaMychal or something and give him 18 minutes a game. I mean, they'd be excited to see that, but there's like no ceiling left for him. Yeah, one of the worst contracts in NBA history. He just fell the fault. He's just he is a bomb casing filled with used pinball machine parts at this point. The team isn't going anywhere for a while. I think they're just giving it out. There have been some rumblings over the last couple of weeks of them running Kyle Anderson slow-mo, sort of as the second unit point guard. There's going to be a couple times he runs the offense. So that's interesting. Although taking forwards and turning them into guards further exacerbates your lineup density issues. You don't really need, turning a 3 into a 1 here, just making shit even more complicated. But it'll be interesting to see how this team fleshes out entirely. Omri Caspi is also on the team. I think I mentioned him before. Again, maybe some time as a backup 3, but not a ton to be exciting. JaMychal Green for Jimmy Butler straight up. Yeah, no, it doesn't help anybody. But yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr., Triple J could really be the truth here. Oh, I guess it's about that time. Let's move we're going to our 3rd consecutive team. This division, the last division was, again, 5 really interesting DFS teams when you talk about the Northwest. 4 teams made the playoffs last year, and almost all 5. 1 team missed by a game. They won all 46 to 49 teams. This division was not quite as impressive. Let's move on to the Dallas Mavericks. Last year's record, 24-58. They also did not make the playoffs. They were a spot or 2 above them. Yeah, Pacific is the Pacific Division will be a little more interesting. I'll probably do that next. Although I should tease you and now do the 3 East ones and then finish up with the Pacific. Vegas also projects them to gain 10 games and has them at 34.5, and I repeat my statement that it'll be interesting to see how that goes. There is a real ceiling for this game. If you told me either they or the Grizzlies were going to win 45 games out of the blue, I would pick the Mavs to do it. But I'm a big Doncic believer. I'm also a fairly big Rick Carlisle believer. For DFS purposes, no, fuck that guy. He's been an absolute nightmare. But can actually coach. So new guys for this team, Kostas Antetokounmpo, the not nearly as talented tertiary brother in the Antetokounmpo family tree behind Thanos, and of course Giannis, and now Kostas, who played right here in Dayton, I might add, so I'll play a couple times. Couple other draft picks, a couple other young guys. You have Spalding and Macon and Brokoff, but obviously Luka Doncic. Devin Harris returning to the team, and DeAndre Jordan, of course, I almost forgot to mention, coming in from the Clips. Not Thanos. Thanis is the middle ones. Thannis, though Thanos would be pretty good. As well as I have a feeling he may have dressed up as him for Halloween at some point. Guys, they lost. Seth Curry went to Portland. Yogi Ferrell went where people go to die, to Sacramento, because they got Ben McLemore and figured out, you know what, we need some more two guards to go along with our collection. Doug McDirt found his way to the Pacers. Jonathan Motley made his way to the Clippers. Nerlens Noel went to Oklahoma City to back up Steven Adams. And Aaron Harrison and Kyle Collinsworth, so far as I'm aware, went to their couch. Their coach again, Rick Carlisle, 10th season in Dallas. 16th overall, I think he did 6 combined years between the Pistons and the Pacers. You have to wonder how hot his seat is getting. They won the title 7 years ago. Since then, they got swept in the first round, missed the playoffs, lost in 7 games in the first round, lost in 5 in the first round, lost in 5 in the first round, missed the playoffs, and missed the playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. That'll be 3 consecutive years they don't make the playoffs, presumably. Playoffs in the West is, I mean, don't get me wrong, that shit's going to happen. Dirk got old. Shit went wrong. But, you know, they have not won a playoff series in 8 years since winning everything. Collinsworth's on the Raptors? See? I didn't know that. I haven't finished up everything on the East. I know basically the top 10 guys on each team, but some of these 11-15s get away from me. So Collinsworth's on the Raptors. There you go. Didn't have it in my notes. It'll be interesting to see how hot Carlisle's seat gets. So starters for this team, again, 3, not unlike Memphis actually. 3, I'm pretty sure on here. Dennis Smith Jr. will start at the point. DeAndre Jordan will start at center, and Harrison Barnes will start at either the 3 or the 4. I'd give about 80% that Doncic starts right from the start of the year. He's that good. But you know, they started off DSJ pretty slow last year. But last year they had sort of that Dallas never fully reload, try to compete every year thing going on, and so eased him in with an eye towards that before they went full tank test out the kiddies mode. I think they start with Doncic in there, who is also a much more refined player than DSJ was at this point last year. So Doncic probably opens the season starting at the 2. So that means either Dirk will come off the bench and Wes Matthews starts with Matthews and Doncic at the 2 and the 3, and Harrison Barnes at the 4, which I think I slightly prefer. Or Wes Matthews will come off the bench, Dirk will start at the 4, and Harry will start at the 3. So don't know which of those is going to happen, but we'll know by the time it's relevant. Injuries entering the season. Dirk had fairly minor ankle surgery or cleanup a couple months ago, but as anyone saw his lightning speed around the back through the legs dunk thing on Instagram, he's 100% or says he'll be 100% by the start of the season. JJ Barea had some lingering issues with like back and oblique at the end of last year, but there were apparently going to be all hands on deck here. Dirk is going to start Lal Doncic off the bench to start. I don't think that's impossible, and that's the reason I didn't say he was definitely going to start, but I'd give you pretty good odds that I think Doncic will start, but we'll see. It's interesting, but I think they just want to get him out there next to DSJ right from the beginning. Andy says Smith Jr., Doncic, Matthews, Barnes, Jordan. Again, that's one of the two most likely ones, I think. Mavericks have the disgusting combination of slow pace and lack of concentrated minutes. Yeah, there's nothing very good going on here for DFS purposes. So anyhow, as I'm reading my notes here, we have a sanger on these parts. Some of you may be familiar with it from previous year's preseason. That's right. Fuck the Mavs. Last year, 19 players saw the court in the preseason. Several veterans rested entire preseason games. You know, just some of the third, some of the fifth. They had 5 preseason games. Harrison Barnes only played 3 of them, but he still averaged the most minutes on the team at 23.4. Wesley Matthews at 23.3. Yogi Ferrell was third at 21.2. And then Dennis Smith Jr., P.J. Dozier, Jan Clavel, and Dirk all played about 19. So yeah, 3 guys got more than 20 minutes a game. Not everyone played all the games. Some of those were late scratches. If you're playing anyone from this team, you are playing the 6 to 10 guys at value prices. Probably not the 1 to 5 guys, unless, of course, we get news that, yeah, we want to give Doncic a lot of time and try him out there with a lot of guys, in which case, yeah, by all means, go crazy. But yes, fuck the Mavs. You've got it correct. Oh, if you insist on looking 1 year before that, Dirk led the preseason with 22.5 minutes per game in the 2016-17 preseason. Second, Darren Williams at 21.4, Wes Matthews and Harrison Barnes at 20.8. 18 guys played. There were 7 preseason games. Only Harrison Barnes played them all. The other 4 starters played 4, 5, 5, and 5 of those 7 games. If for some reason we want to play them, I will again repeat to you, they only have 3 preseason games, and they only have 1 in this hemisphere. They will play the 2 games in Shanghai and Shenzhen against the 76ers, which I'm really excited to watch. But they will play, I believe those 2 games precede their 1 game. So at the end of the preseason, they have 1 game. I think it's at home, and I think it's against Charlotte off the top of my head. But where am I getting my minutes totals from? From my own personal database, but I pulled that from Real GM, I believe is the site I use for preseason stats most of the time. They have a nice sortable interface thing. If you can't find it easily, just but it's like realgm.com or realgm.nba. You'll find it if you do a quick Google search on it. You're going to stay up till 3 a.m. to watch those games. No. I'm going to watch those games like after dropping my daughter off at school or something. I believe those games tip at 7:30 a.m. and 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, no. I'm going to take my daughter to school, come back and sit down and eat my egg whites and watch those games. So, no, it times out very nicely, actually. Good question, though, Andy. But, yeah, I believe they're 7:30 and 8 a.m. Eastern, if I recall. You should be able to look that one up. So, yeah, I guess we'll simply move on. There's some interesting guys to talk about on this team. I think Dennis Smith Jr. takes a step back. His usage should go down. So he had monster usage last year, 30%-ish. That number is going to come down with the addition of Doncic and the addition of DeAndre Jordan. But he should be more efficient with the shots he does take. But the addition of Doncic takes everyone back a step. I don't think DeAndre Jordan is as good as he was last year. So literally Mavs, who I expect to improve this year as be better DFS players than they were last year, I'm not sure anybody. Maybe Harry. Maybe DSJ. Just because, A, he'll be more efficient, and B, he's making that sophomore jump. So there's just a chance he becomes a much better basketball player. He's obviously still a kid. So maybe DSJ you could convince me of. But, yeah, so lots of reasons we're not super excited about this team. And so I will stop spending time to see. Like Harrison Barnes, you want to think, but like so much of his value just comes from scoring. He's just the #1 scorer on this team, and he's putting up 18, 20 points a night. And he's not a guy who contributes in a lot of other ways. So now I think that comes down. So it's really hard to see anyone going crazy here. So moving on, let's go to somewhat more of a high note. Talk about the Houston Rockets. It's gonna start off kind of sad for me. Last year's record. I promised I wouldn't cry. 65-17, the best record in the league by 6 games, I believe. Love this team from the preseason. Made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. Lost in 7 with the unlikely and somewhat excruciating combination. Again, I would say in my life I've placed 50 sports bets, maybe less. but I threw a month's pay at the Rockets to win that series outright and got very good odds. Got basically 3-1. And yeah, so I didn't get my fairly significant 5-digit payday because, you know, Chris Paul gets injured, and then they miss, when they're up quite a bit in Game 7, they miss 27 consecutive three-pointers, which still, I don't know quite how that happened. But anyhow, that's last year. Arrgh. Potential Vegas record, you've seen as high as like 59, but a lot of shops still have them all the way down at 56 and 26 for records. So that would be them seeding 9 games, but they're still favored to win this division by a pretty massive amount. I think most shops off the top of my head have them 8 or 10 games better than the Pelicans. So according to Vegas, the Rockets win this division in a walk. I think it may be closer than that. Or at least I think both teams' win totals will be a little higher. I would bet the over on both the Vegas Pelicans number and the Vegas Houston number. Like, I do think they're going to be worse. Losing Maumute and losing Ariza, dealing with Carmelo issues and potential drama, and who knows how healthy Chris Paul is going to be. Like, I do think 65 in a now even tougher Western Conference, yeah, that's unreasonable. But 9 games is a lot of games to drop off. So, let me find my Rockets notes. New additions. Obviously, they picked up some kids. We got Vincent Edwards and Gary Clark. Isaiah Hartenstein. Traded for Michael Carter, signed Michael Carter Williams, rather. Let me get that straight. Bruno Caboclo. But, of course, Brandon Knight, who we won't see for a while with some knee issues. James Ennis, who's going to be a fairly important fantasy guy we should talk about for a little bit. And a guy from the Thunder known as Carmelo Anthony. They shipped off, well, first Trevor Ariza went to Phoenix. He took the money, like 1 year, $15 million or whatever, and then they said, oh yeah, well, you take these guys too, and they sent along Ryan Anderson right behind him. They also, let's see, Luke Mba Mute went back to the Clips. Joe Johnson is gone, Aaron Jackson is gone, Tariq Black is, I think, playing for an Israeli team. Markel Brown is gone, and Chinanu Onuaku is with Portland. I don't think I'm missing anyone who left. Anyhow, coach is Mike D'Antoni. His 3rd year with Houston, 15th overall year after stomps with the Lakers, the Knicks, the Suns, and the Nuggets. The Nuggets is the hard part of the trivia question. Name the 5 teams Mike D'Antoni has been the head coach of. He coached them, I think, just 1 year in the strike-shortened years, so like 99. This is Bruno Caboclo's breakout year. No, he's not full Thibodeau, but D'Antoni runs himself a short rotation, including in the preseason, which is something we're pretty excited about, and we'll definitely get into. But this is one of the teams, based on what we know right now, that we should be pretty locked in on. So expected starters, obviously Chris Paul, James Harden, and Clint Capella for sure. Almost now, I believe the starting 5 on opening night will be those 3 guys, James Ennis and PJ Tucker, at the 3 and the 4. But that's not locked in stone. You could, in theory, get either of those guys replaced by Melo, but I think it'd be more likely he would replace Tucker, who would go back to coming off the bench. So you're going to get Paul, Harden, and Capella. 90% you're going to get James Ennis, and then I think 70-30 you get PJ Tucker over Carmelo Anthony. Yeah, I don't know how, like, going on a 2-way contract or training camp deals with the Rockets is like, so again, we're going to talk about how excited we are about this team in the preseason, but guess how many players played for them in the entire preseason last year? I believe they had 5 games. This many. 10. That's it. 10 guys touched the court as opposed to 19 for the Mavs and all that shit. Injuries entering the season. Obviously, Brandon Knight, just a week ago or something, had his 2nd knee surgery of the off-season, but cashing those checks. They don't need a backup point guard on this team because either Chris Paul or James Harden is the backup point guard. They're going to need a plan, obviously, for when one of those guys are out. They brought in basically Michael Carter Williams, who I think will pick up that role on days that one of those guys can't play. But generally, the backup point guard isn't someone who's going to get a lot of time in this unit. Michael Carter Williams himself had, I believe, his shoulder surgery in the offseason, but I think he's fully recovered from that. Okay, so last year's preseason, let me adjust my package real quick so I have room to talk about this. James Harden played 32 minutes a game. Trevor Ariza played 30. Chris Paul, before hurting himself, played 27. Eric Gordon played 25.5. Clint Capella played 25.5. Ryan Anderson played 25.1. 6 guys on this team played 25 minutes a game or more, and we knew it was coming because D'Antoni said it over and over and over. He said, we only have 5 preseason games. We want to figure it out. We want to win everything this year. Starters are going to play. He wasn't fucking kidding. They played 10 guys total. Ma Mute played 23.8 minutes, and PJ Tucker played 23.7 minutes. So they had 8 players who played 23.7 minutes or more in the last preseason, which 23.7 minutes would have been the most on, off the top of my head, I believe 8 of the 30 NBA teams last preseason. I don't know if there's anything else to say about that, but yeah. They were, Eddie, be real with you, a Rockets fan, how far are you going to get in the playoffs? It'll look familiar. You'll lose to the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. It'll feel good. But won't be as close this time. Won't be as heartbreaking. I won't bet on them, and it won't cost me, like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. Let's see, what else? So, yeah, Mike D'Antoni is notorious for running short rotations, albeit in a slightly less, but abjectly stupid way than say, Tom Thibodeau. And rest guys a little better and cycle guys a little better, and, you know, rarely does. I think you need 46.5 minutes tonight, even though we're up 14. Like, he's not that ridiculous about it. If you go back and look at the preseason before that, for reference, and I went back and looked at a lot of my notes also from the news conference. I have a fairly extensive pile of notes of where I pull all this information from. Harden still played 29.4 a game 2 years ago. So, again, that's pretty exciting. But then you get down to Ariza at 25.4, Ryan Anderson at 24.9, and then that took you all the way down to KJ McDaniels at 21.1. But checking the quote page in my, believe it or not, Microsoft Access database here, that was about exactly what we expected. So again, we can sort of trust D'Antoni when it comes to these things, and we'll be listening closely for the next week. But again, hopefully a great source of joy and profit. One of 3 teams last year, along with the Pistons, a couple other teams who were really nice to target last year. And unlike the Pistons, who I expect to do something absolutely different this year, Houston, I would be surprised if they weren't another source of value. So again, talking about the rotation here and breaking it down. You want someone to whisper in your ear and lie to you and tell you that the Rockets will win the conference. You're going to need some injuries or some luck. Or some non-injuries. Like, it is not... This team is worse than the team last year when judged objectively on their ability to beat the Golden State Warriors. Losing Mahmoud and Ariza and picking up Ennis and Melo is not a profitable swap as far as that matchup goes. I mean, they're just worse in that matchup. So, last year, gun to my head who was going to win, I would have said the Golden State Warriors. But with the odds, I like the Rockets a lot more. It was a team that was really well built to compete with those Warriors. Lots of great peripheral defenders. So I would have given the Warriors like a 60-40, just straight out edge in there, which made the odds you were getting with the Rockets a really good bet for me. Bruno is a better defender than both Luke and Ariza. You know, I have the vague impression of him being an above-average defender, but through his travels, and, you know, I've seen him on the court for 6 or 7 minutes at a time. Like, I'd like to say I have a decent sense. I can describe the defensive strengths and attributes of 80% of the players in the NBA, but I can't give you a Bruno Caboclo defensive take off the top of my head. Hopefully it gets enough time where it becomes relevant, and I got to review some tape. So again, CP3, Harden, Eric Gordon, James Ennis, Carmelo, PJ Tucker, and Clint Capella are the 7 guys who are going to eat 85% of the minutes on this team. They will run a 9-man rotation most of the year. The 8th guy is almost certainly going to be Gerald Green. The 9th guy will be either Nene or Marquise Chris or Isaiah Hartenstein. One of those guys will get in there and be sort of the spare big. And that's another thing we'll pay attention to. But those 7 guys are going to eat the most of the time. No real reason to have an extended CP3 take here. Again, for what it's worth, Harden easily led the team in minutes each of the previous 2 preseasons, and hopefully we get news he's going to do that again, and he can be, first guy in. Chalky man, You know, Eric Gordon, again, not a ton to add here. His role shouldn't change. James Ennis is going to be sort of a poor man's Trevor Ariza. A little worse at defense, a little worse at shooting three-pointers, but, you know, D'Antoni has repeatedly encouraged him to take every three-pointer he can get, which, you know, feels good. Do I think Knight will get run? I don't. I think Knight will get some walking with a crutch in the hospital for quite some time before he gets any run. But yeah, eventually he's the best guy to be that backup guard. Like, he should take basically Gerald Green's role in this rotation if he returns to the kind of player he was back in the always play Brandon Knight against Kemba Walker and vice versa days. If you've been with me for 3 years or so, you'll get that reference. But you know, he's a great defender. Wiggins, top 5 player in the league, easy. Andy, put down the pipe. It's time to get help. We're friends. You're in a safe place, but it's time to think about your family. What do you really want to do with the rest of your life? So yeah. Anyhow, we're going to about a 9-man rotation. Probably the 7 guys I mentioned at the top: CP3, Harden, Gordon, Ennis, Carmelo, Tucker, and Capella. We're trying to think who's relevant to have takes on for the preseason or big takes for the relevant season. Capella's minute should come way up. He didn't play a ton last year. Signed his deal, you know, got $90 million in the bank. So I think his number does really come up. The absence of Ryan Anderson will help with that. They'll run small a bit. You know, this is a team that we talk about who's going to be the backup point guard. They don't really need one. We talk about who's going to be the backup center. We don't really need one. It's kind of PJ Tucker sometimes. So it will be interesting to see how this team evolves to use other players than those we mentioned. But James Ennis is going to get a significant number of minutes here due to just the roster construction at this point. Unless he's awful, in which case you will see some really weird CP3 next to Harden, next to Gordon jump going around, or just more of Gerald Green spending time at the 3. You know, I think Melo will play 26 minutes a game. And at this stage in his career, it's obviously everything is price dependent in salary cap games, but it's going to be difficult to deploy him for a while. But we'll see how low that price gets, you know, postseason. Will Harden lead the league in points? Yeah, I mean, I think he ended up over 30 last year with some really impressive number. He'd be my favorite to lead the league in scoring. Yes, I think it's most likely that he scores the most points in the league. There's other guys who have a shot at it. I could see Curry. I could see Anthony Davis if that team, who we're going to talk about in a second, keeps up a fairly ridiculous pace that they played for the second half of the year without Boogie. I can see other guys doing it, but yeah, you'd say who's going to lead the league in points. My first choice right now would be James Harden. Anyone else on this team I want to talk about? No, I mean they. So when they sent Ryan Anderson and DeAnthony Melton, I did mention, who they sent along with Ryan Anderson. That was a tough blow. It was not a trade that made the team better. They got Marquise Chris and Brandon Knight, who, if neither of them played a minute for the Rockets this year in the regular season, I wouldn't be surprised. So there's literally a chance that trade costs them DeAnthony Melton and gains them nothing as far as their ability to play on the court. Now, it's a huge money-saving deal getting the Ryan Anderson contract off the books, and so I understand it. But, you know, if Chris Paul gets hurt, and we hope Chris Paul is going to play 60 games again, you hope he's going to get 70 this year. If he plays 40 games or something, not having DeAnthony Melton in there is going to sunk a little bit for you. So that I get that trade, but you know, it sucks to lose Melton. He would have been an interesting guy to try to work his way into this rotation. I'm struggling, so let's go ahead and move on to our final team. Yes, we have some shitty teams here, but at least we sort of ramped it up. We ended with Rockets and Pelicans, so there's some foreplay there, just some gentle petting, and now we're into the main event here. The New Orleans Pelicans, last year's record 48-34, which was a 3-way tie for that record, alongside the Jazz and Thunder. They had the worst tiebreaker, so they were the 6 seed, and in the first round they played the 3 seed, who was exactly, I believe, 1 game better. And those were the Trailblazers, who they curb stomped and embarrassed and swept the hell out of there before understandably getting dispatched themselves by the Warriors in 5 games. Most shops have them around 46 wins, suggesting they're going to regress by a couple. I like them to stay steady at about 48 and be fighting for the end of the playoffs. I know certain people who think they're going to be tremendous. A couple people in the chat are talking about that quite a bit. I do agree with the assertion of someone a minute ago that Julius Randle coming in from the Lakers makes this offense exciting. This offense was already still really exciting for the second half of last year. So additions for this team, we'll do it in order again. Elfrid Payton, who's going to come right in and start in place of Rondo, from the New Orleans area, by the way. It's his hometown, or close to his hometown, which I think is good and not irrelevant for fantasy considerations, as dumb as it sounds. Having lots of family around and lots of friends around can be bad, but more frequently I think is actually a good thing. And Elfrid's always been a guy who has unexplored and untapped potential, so I like getting Elfrid Payton in there, and I do think that team moves even faster now. Julius Randle in from the Lakers is the other big one there. Jahlil Okafor is still there, in from Brooklyn rather. Emeka Okafor was just waived, I think, 2 days ago, which is a shame because I enjoy some old man basketball. They also picked up Darius Morris. Be careful if you're playing them this year to play Darius Miller when you're trying to not Darius Morris. Troy Williams, I think, is still on the roster, who we mentioned a little while ago. And Trayvon Blewett did not blow it in Summer League, someone who made some money and who we talked about pretty frequently. Guys they lost, again, most importantly, the two names there would be Rondo to the Lakers, which is still weird when I think about how that quite comes together, because the guys they're putting together on that team, maybe they're going to be great, but the dudes they're putting around Braun are not guys I'm thinking, that guy's good on the court with Braun. We'll see how that goes. And, of course, DeMarcus Cousins jacked up his ankle Rudy Gay style and is now, well, not his ankle, his Achilles, and is now on the bargain deal with the Golden State Warriors, going to get himself a ring and reload for his next contract, which makes a lot of sense for him. Your coach here is Alvin Gentry, who's one up on Mike D'Antoni. They've both coached for 5 teams. This is, I believe, D'Antoni's 15th year. This is Gentry's 16th year. Postseason, not as impressive as D'Antoni, to be sure. In his 15 years, he got fired 3 times mid-season, so he only made the end of the year 12 times. And out of the 12 times one of his teams made the end of the year, only 3 times did they make the playoffs. I think he lost once in the first round, once in the second, and once in the conference final. You know, career still, even in his 16th year, I believe a 40% and 47% winner. Though, again, he spent the largest stretch of his career with the Suns. That's going to mess up your winning percentage by a fair bit for most of the last few decades, is outside of the 7-second D'Antoni Suns. Most of them have been very good. That being said, this is a team that has a lot in common with those 7-second D'Antoni Suns. They're going to really, really execute quickly. I think your starting 5, the locks are Elfrid Payton, Drew Holiday, and Anthony Davis. There is some question at the 3 whether or not they'll start E'Twaun Moore or Solomon Hill. I think they'll start E'Twaun Moore, not Solomon Hill, but that's not locked in stone. That could go the other way. There's some merit to E'Twaun Moore as a 6-man gunner role, so that could happen, but I think it's more likely he starts. And I think Julius Randle starts, and they keep bringing Mirotic off the bench. That looked really good. But again, Mirotic obviously started some number of games last year and had some monster games, including games when starting. So we will see how exactly that works out. Notable injuries entering the year. Nobody? I can't think of anybody injured on this team. I think this team is entirely healthy. Minutes last year, not rocket-esque, but Drew Holiday, Boogie, and Brow all played every game of the preseason and all saw between 24.7 and 25.5 minutes per game and played every game. So an above-average level of exposure. So not necessarily superlative minutes, but average to a little bit better. And some guys will have some interest in, not as much as, say, you know, the Rockets or a couple other teams in a vacuum. But, again, listing guys I'm interested in by team, they'd be, you know, 7th, 8th in that area. And we expect this team to move it. There should be some really impressive pace here. They're going to be top 2 or 3 in the league in pace, I think. Like, they're really going to go. You know, the year before, they were much more youth-centered and minutes. Buddy Hield, as a rookie, had 27.3 minutes that year. Solomon Hill was second with 27. Tim Frazier was third with 26.9. Terrence Jones was fourth with 25.8. Lance Stevenson was fifth with 23.8. Of those top 5 players, only Solomon Hill remains with the team 2 years later. Anthony Davis played only 5 of 6 games and only played 19.6 minutes per. So I do expect it to be more like last year than 2 years ago, for a couple of reasons. One, obviously last year was a successful year. Two, last year they were trying to see if they could be competitive. 2 years ago they just knew they probably weren't going to be. So they have hopes this year. I could throw a lot of stats at you about how fast this team played and how offensively impressive they were at the second half last year. But like March and April basketball were fun because of the Rockets and the Pelicans. And when you get rid of Boogie and add Julius Randle and get rid of Rondo and add Elfrid Payton, it's going to be good. Your pace is going to be up. Your defense is going to be better too. Elfrid Payton has been a much worse defender in the NBA than I thought he would be. When he played somewhere around here. He played in the Midwest, I think. But in college, he won Defensive Player of the Year in the conference, I think. And those Orlando teams were a sieve, partially because of him, and also partially because of some fairly bad defenses and played by Skiles and a number of other shitty guys. One sec, I gotta drink something. Power up. So I believe the Pelicans had the most overtime quarters last year. They smashed over-unders, best record in terms of over-under. I wouldn't be surprised, especially because there's going to be, the month after Boogie went out when whatever they were projected for, boy, they beat the shit out of those projections. So, yeah, they played at a really stupid pace. They lost Boogie and just started rim running again and again and really unreleased Brow. And, again, replacing Rondo with Elf is going to help at both ends of the court. Elf is a guy we should really look at in the preseason. If they price him based on his disastrous Phoenix run there at the end of last year, or depending on what his price is, that's definitely a guy we're going to want to pay some attention to. So again, Emeka Okafor is gone. So for the bigs, Brow, Orange, Julius, and Mirotic are going to eat most of those minutes with Emeka out of town. There's going to be some role for either Jahlil Okafor, who's also on the team, or Cheick Diallo, who's been there for 3 years now, and has a very sort of Thomas Robinson-y. I can pick up some massive double-doubles, Terrence Jones-y stat lines that he can put up pretty easily. So it'll be interesting to see which of those guys win that battle. I think it should be Cheick Diallo, but we'll see how that works out. Your core rotation here is going to be Elf, Drew, Etuan Moore, Solomon Hill, Mirotic, Randle, and Brow. Those 7 guys will be the core here. Not unlike we were just talking about Houston, they'll have their 7 guys, plus Gerald Green will be 8 in a smaller role, and then they'll have probably a backup big or some 9th guy. They'll probably run 10 guys here as more Gentry style, so you'll get those 7 guys of Elf, Drew, Etuan, Solomon Hill, Mirotic, Randle, Brow, and then they're going to add 1 more guard, certainly, maybe 2. But Ian Clark / Jarrett Jack is in town, who I didn't list before, but he's still with the team, and they'll fight for some backup minutes, and Frank Jackson as well. They'll pick a guard out of there. Probably Darius Miller will keep a role. Again, make sure you're rostering the right Darius. And then 1 additional big, which again is going to be one of Okafor or Diallo. Asik is back to Chicago. Ajinça is injured. Ajinça for some reason didn't enter my calculus here, and I just was pretty positive he wasn't going to play. I'm not 100% sure he's still under contracts, but we're coming up on done here. So let's all take a second and look what sexy Alexi Ajinça is doing with himself. All I see are options to trade him and expiring contracts, and we can trade him and flip his contract. And will he be on the roster? Like, I would still, if he was there and healthy, I would still put him, especially with the pace that this team is going to run, as at best 3rd on that list to try to get on that 4th guard spot. So he's not going to be fantasy relevant, barring some very strange things happening in the next week. Let me scroll back and check. Re-signed Ian Clark. Yeah, I mentioned that. Let's check to see if there's any other questions. If you have any other questions, fire them up, because we're mostly done with this one. If you didn't see the Northwest Division preview, a little bit more information than this one, because you had 5 really fantasy relevant teams. where if we had a few we can just sort of write off here, or at least be less concerned with. Do you think the offensive efficiency will decrease with the loss of Rondo? He's such a great distributor. Drew Holiday was a beast playing off ball next to Rondo. Yeah, there's a lot of point guards in the league who are better off the ball when you look at their advanced stats. Elf is one of them. I like having him off the ball. Jamal Murray is another one. I love having Jamal Murray out there when he's not doing the primary ball handling. He's a much more effective fantasy player. I expect Dennis Smith Jr. would be one. Do I expect the offense efficiency will decrease with the loss of Rondo? Yes. In a vacuum, just discussed, or on a basketball court. It's my joke. I haven't used it in months. Obviously, Elfrid Payton is not as experienced or as good at running an offense as Rajon Rondo. That being said, I would expect the volume to increase roughly proportionately to the loss in efficiency. And I think there is room for improvement there. And, Randall is going to make everyone a little more impressive. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly who they go, whether or not they put Solomon Hill or Moore out there, because if they put Solomon Hill out there, that will neuter the offense, but it will give them, a second very good wing defender there. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yes, in a vacuum, I do think changing Rondo to Elfrid Payton will hurt your efficiency. They have a few camp deals too. I definitely think so. I don't think they're really relevant. I mean, I don't think Blewett finding his way, Trevin Blewett into the rotation, I don't think is impossible. You can always use a guy. Like, he shot extremely well in the summer league, and he might be able to do Etuan Moore's job about as well as Etuan Moore. Or Etuan Moore could get hurt, and he's right now a better offensive player already than Solomon Hill. So, maybe he cracks the rotation. He's interesting. Steph Curry off the ball. Lillard is a shooting guard. Yeah. So there it is. Give you guys 30 seconds to fire up any more questions if you have them. Otherwise, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Made it through in just a hair under an hour. We'll probably come back and do it up again Saturday night. Might finish off the West, or might be a tease. Go look at some of those mid-Atlantic teams. Haven't decided yet. I end up with a couple pages of notes on every team, and whenever I'm realizing I have to do another show, I'm like, okay, I got to take 5 and finalize them. So that's how much I would have left. Thank you for the compliment, Ozzy. Yeah, this is fun for me. And again, as of right now, it wouldn't surprise me if we go all the way free all the way into the preseason. So that's great news for those of you who foolishly aren't Awesemo.com subscribers. There's a real chance that I'll be hosting a football show this Sunday morning with an interesting format that I've been trying to get going for a couple of years that the folks at Awesemo have, I think, will allow me to get going. So I'll tweet something about that if that comes to pass. But hopefully going to be having some more fun this weekend. And again, we got, we're, a week, literally a week from tonight, I believe, is that single game first Boston-Charlotte slate. So, yeah, we're going to have to keep banging out these shows. So with that, I am Fast Eddie Fear. It is my pleasure, as always, to service you. And I'll see you guys again in 2 days at